So today we have Jessie Dahl as our speaker on Backyard Berries, and you're in for a treat because Jessie's always a great speaker, wealth of knowledge, and entertaining. So Jessie has a bachelor's degree in horticulture from the University of Idaho. Sorry. And he was a groundskeeper at the University of Idaho Arboretum following that, and then a horticulturalist at the Morton Arboretum. And then he came here to Lexington, Kentucky, where he is now the horticulturalist at the Arboretum garden in State Botanical Garden here in Kentucky in Lexington. And he's also an ISA certified arborist, and he lives here in Woodford County on a farm that he has 30 acres, and he farms with his family and does a lot of his own vegetable garden production and growing fruit as well and berries. So I will turn it over to you, Jessie.
All right, thank you. Let's see if we can share the screen. Maybe. All right, you guys seeing that?
Yep, if you just do presentation mode, I think you're ready to go.
All right, so there's that. All right, well, thank you all for joining me. Like Faye said, I am the senior horticulturist here at the Arboretum, and berries and small fruits are one of my passions. I love them. I grow, I sell at the Woodford County Farmers Market, and I love growing fruits and vegetables. I love growing vegetables, but I really love growing and eating fruits, especially small fruits. So today we're going to talk about berries that you can grow in your own backyard. We're going to talk about some of the common ones. We've got strawberry, the blackberry, raspberry, blueberry. So some of the common ones. Somebody raised their hand. Is there a question? Oh. Before I get crazy into this, first thing is if you have a question, please type it in the chat box, and Faye or somebody can get my attention and we will discuss it. I love to answer questions. That's what I'm here for. And so if you have a question, type it in the chat box. We'll get to it. And maybe at the end, or maybe if I can see it in the middle, we'll get to it when we can. So with that, we've got the common berries. So the native ones, we'll talk about some of the native ones. There's a lot of native berries that you can grow. The blackberry, of course, is native. There's new cultivars, there's thornless, all sorts of that, but it came from the native blackberries. Black raspberry, you see those growing around on my farm and other farms. Blueberries, they grow here, but they grow in more sandy soils, kind of over in the knobs or in the Appalachian Plateau. Elderberry is another common one that you'll see around. Black chokeberry, serviceberry, thimbleberry. The more common ones we're going to talk about more in depth a little bit later on. We'll talk about elderberry is a really good one to grow. People are growing a lot more for its health benefits. I know this winter with COVID and colds and stuff, I've been taking the elderberry, the Sambucus gummies all the time. My family is a big fan of those. Especially my son, he really, really loves those. He's 2 years old, so anything gummy is his favorite. But a lot of people are growing those for their health benefits. And elderberries are pretty simple to grow. And they're one of the easiest things to propagate. If you haven't propagated anything on your own, with elderberries, you take a piece of the stem that's alive this time of year. You can cut it into like 2-foot sections and stick it in the ground. If you keep it moist, it'll root and grow you another elderberry. So really easy to grow, really easy to propagate on your own. There's newer cultivars like York and those that have bigger berries or more berries. But even the wild ones are pretty tasty. I have one right outside my house that we harvest and boil down for syrup and stuff every year. With the elderberries, there's a red elderberry and a black elderberry. The black one is one we most commonly eat. Apparently, they're both edible, the red and the black, but the reds have higher, in the seeds and in the leaves of both of them, there is a toxin, a compound that's toxic. So you don't want to eat a lot of the seeds, and you definitely don't want to eat the leaves. But the black elderberry is definitely better for and more recommended for those that you're going to eat. You can eat probably a couple by hand a couple of the berries by themselves, but they recommend if you're going to eat really the elderberry that you should cook it, and that breaks down those toxins. Black chokeberry is another one that people are growing, especially you can see it in the juice aisle. They put chokeberry juice in it and it gives it a dark color. If you have a problem with birds, elderberries, the birds love elderberries and they will, as soon as they start turning dark, they'll just rob the whole bush. Chokeberry, apparently the birds don't like that much. Everywhere I've seen chokeberry in the wild and on the farm where I've grown it, those berries stay on way into the wintertime. The birds will eventually eat it around Christmas, I think, when they get hungry and the fruits have been able to ferment a little bit. But the black chokeberry, it's not really damaged much by the birds. Another common one we have is serviceberry. I have yet to see anyone really develop a serviceberry that's just specifically for eating, that was developed for because it had bigger berries or better fruit. There are a few that were developed because they make nice trees, but I haven't seen any that were developed because of the fruit. But they're nice to snack on. I have some planted in my orchard at home. At the Arboretum, when they're in fruit, they're nice to snack on. They look like a little blueberry. There's definitely some trees have better fruit than other trees. There's some trees here at the Arboretum that are my favorite when they're in fruit. Other trees that I won't eat anymore. I don't touch because I've tasted them 2 or 3 times and I don't like them, the taste of that one. So they can vary by trees because there's no cultivar out there really based on the fruit. Thimbleberry is another one. You probably will never grow this one to be a millionaire, but it's one you can try. It's a berry that grows decently in the shade, so that's another advantage of this one. The thimbleberry is that little raspberry looking one at the bottom of the picture. The reason why you'll probably never see this making millions is because the berries, pretty well once they turn ripe, they almost fall apart. They're so tender, so you couldn't ever ship them anywhere. But they're super sweet and a little bit tangy tasting, so I like them whenever I can find them, but it's more of just a snack other than something you're going to grow all the time. All right, some non-native berries. So we've got of course, the strawberry is kind of it's a native, non-native. The strawberry that we eat, that you grow in your gardens, is actually a cross between the strawberry, the woodland strawberry that you can find out in the woods. It has an itty bitty little strawberry, and a Chilean strawberry. The Chilean strawberry gets a lot bigger, and the woodland strawberry that we grow here that's native is able to grow in a lot of different habitats. We have some just growing as a ground cover in the children's garden. Other places you'll see it in the mountains, you'll see it all over. So it gave a lot more variety. So they crossed those two, the Chilean and the native woodlands, or Fragacia virginiana, they cross those two, and that's the strawberry that we eat today. So it's part native, part non-native. Raspberry, the gooseberry, the currants. There are gooseberries that grow in Kentucky that are native, but none of those do we really eat. Currants, goji berries are another interesting crop. If you've ever grown goji berries, I've grown them for 4 or 5 years now. They seem to grow well. If you put them in a decent spot, they'll grow really well, almost a little weedy. I'm not a particular fan of goji berries. They supposedly have really good health benefits, but to me, they taste like a bad tomato. They're in like that same family. They kind of look like a little tomato. They taste like you crossed a tomato and an eggplant and a pepper and something else and put it together. Not the greatest taste, but I guess if you put it in something for the health benefits, it's probably, seems like anything that's really healthy for you tastes really bad, so it should be really healthy for you. Honeyberry is another one. It is the blue one. It looks like a blueberry, a really long blueberry. It is it's actually in the honeysuckle family, so it's really interesting. The plants grow really well here in forests in Kentucky. Like if you look around, there's honeysuckle everywhere. This is a different honeysuckle, and it doesn't get as big or is it weedy like the other honeysuckles, but it does grow really well. The biggest problem with the honeyberries for us in Kentucky is honeyberries are native to Siberia. And so they could take the cold, they could take a lot colder than we get, but they bloom really early in the spring. So sometimes they're blooming in March. And a lot of times those flowers get frozen off. And so you may not get very good fruit production ever, or seldom if ever. The fruit is really good tasting. It's kind of like a really tart blueberry, but it varies between cultivars. Out at South Farm here at UK, they had a honeyberry trial. John Strang invited me to go taste a bunch of them. And it was definitely a lot of variety and a lot of different textures and taste just in between the 10 or 15 different types they had in that trial. Some good ones, if you want to plant some of those we've had good luck with are Sunrise and Early Blue. But definitely give honeyberries a try if you have a spot and I really like them. And I keep planting more and more every a few years. Like last year, we didn't get any fruit. The year before, we got a pretty good amount. So if you get really late, or you get early and mid freezes, if it gets really cold, you're gonna lose those blooms, so you may not get any fruit. Wineberry, that's another one. We have one vendor at the farmer's market that makes jam out of that every year and sells the wineberry jam. It's a nice tasting little berry. One issue with it is that it can be invasive. If you go up to Red River Gorge and go up to Natural Bridge, that berry that you see climbing all over the whole hillside, that's wineberry. So it does for in the bluegrass, I'd say it's all right. It's not super invasive for us here. But if you get over Red River Gorge where you have a sandier soil, it can take over and move into the woods and take over places. Last one is the hardy kiwi. You can see it's that little green one up in the corner. And I chose that picture up there in the corner because when you look at that whenever you look at the hardy kiwi, they show you these picture perfect fruits that you in the magazines, and you're like, oh yeah, I want to plant some hardy kiwi. I've grown hardy kiwi, 15 years now, or maybe 20. I've only ever eaten 2, and those 2 I hand pollinated because they don't seem to get, they bloom really early and they don't seem to have the right pollinators in our climate. They're native to Russia and that area and Mongolia. The problem with them is in part of China. The problem with them that we have is usually we don't get very good pollination. And so I've hand pollinated some and been able to eat a couple, but most years all I get is a big vine. There is a new one I just saw this last week in preparing for this talk that is, and I'm thinking about ordering some from my farm, that it is self-fertile, so you don't have to have a male and a female. With the hardy kiwi, you have to have a male and a female. But with this new one, they have both the male and the female flowers on the same plant. So I'm hoping with this new one that it'll get better pollination, and so I can actually eat some. The fruit does taste good. It's not very big. It's not like eating a regular kiwi. I mean, these fruit are the size of maybe a large blueberry, a really large blueberry. So not very big at all. I noticed I skipped over to the gooseberry and the currant. The currants, they grow really well for us. If you want to grow the toughest currant, if you have a spot that you want to grow something edible and nothing will grow, black currant is probably the winner. I don't really like the taste of black currants. They have kind of a savory taste when I'm looking for something more sweet and tart. But I've literally pulled them up, left them on the burn pile, and the plant still lived and fruited on the burn pile. Those plants seem to be able to live anywhere, the black currants. The red currant and the white currant seem to be a little bit more harder to grow. They'll still grow really well for us, but they're not like the black currant that you can just throw them on any old pile and they'll just do their thing. And the gooseberry, there are a couple of thornless ones now, but most of them have some sort of thorns. I remember growing up in Idaho and Montana, we'd always go pick the wild gooseberries and we'd make pies and stuff and cobblers out of them. Around here, at least at the Arboretum, we have a problem. There is a little, I think it's a sawfly that will come and defoliate them a lot of years. And so we'll have to pick those off. With the currants and gooseberries, and probably most of the berries you're going to find, you're going to have to do something for the birds, especially the currants and gooseberries. If you don't put bird netting over them or something, you probably won't get any. Every year for 2 or 3 years, we didn't get any gooseberries or currants because the plants would be totally loaded And as soon as the first one started to turn colors, the next day I'd go out and they would all be gone. It looked like somebody came through and literally cleared every berry, green or otherwise, off the plant. There wasn't any of them to have. Until we finally covered up with bird netting, and then we had a plethora of fruit. So if you grow currants, gooseberries especially, you're going to want to cover those up. And the goji berry, not so much. I mean, the birds will eat some of those, but they don't seem to go crazy. But the currants and gooseberries, the birds go crazy for those. And as soon as they start to turn colors, they'll just all disappear. Okay, so now we're going to get in depth a little bit onto some of the common ones and how to grow them. And the first one on our list is strawberries. Strawberries are everyone's favorites. My kids love them. I love them. And they're a pretty easy plant to grow if you do a couple basics. First of all, you want to plant a good variety. One of the best, the ones I recommend and have been recommending for a while, and my favorite is Flavorfest. I've planted Flavorfest here at the Arboretum at my home. I'm planting another 200 feet of rows at my own house this spring of those. They are disease resistant. They seem to really thrive on our soils. They have really big berries. Really, really great strawberry. I can't say enough about them. With Early Glow, that's an old time one, but I helped Dr. Strang out for several years with his trials, and every year Early Glow wins the taste comparison. It has the best taste. But every year I can tell you when I'm picking out of 20 different varieties of strawberries, I can tell you when I'm picking Early Glow, because after 2 or 3 weeks, I'm picking strawberries the size of peas. And it's really annoying to pick strawberries the size of little peas, or maybe they're maybe dime sized when you're picking Flavorfest and some of the other varieties that are the size of a $50. So it has really small fruit the first week or two, and that's with most berries. You're going to get the first week and second week are going to be your largest fruits. The plant puts all of its nutrients, all of its energy into growing those, and then after the first 2 weeks, you'll still probably get several fruits, but those are going to get smaller and smaller, and that really is apparent with Early Glow. After the first week or two, next fruits, pretty well all the way after that, are going to be the size of a dime or a little bit smaller than that. So they're really little, but they taste really great. I mean, Early Glow's been around longer than I've been alive, and it's had the best flavor in that whole time. You would think after almost 40 years, we'd come up with a better tasting strawberry, but we haven't. So if you want really taste, don't mind picking some small berries, Early Glow, but Flavorfest, for me, produces a lot bigger berries, a lot more of them. And the leaves and stuff look great. I never have problems with any diseases. I don't spray them with anything. If you want an ever-bearing one, I don't plant very many ever-bearing ones. June-bearing ones will produce more fruit in that June time than ever-bearings will produce the entire year. So if you want a lot of fruit, June-bearing is the way to go. But if you want just a little to snack on, you can plant an ever-bearing. I have Seascape. It does pretty well for us. What I've noticed with the ever-bearing ones is they seem after a couple of years you'll need to fertilize them some more because they get worn out. When you're producing fruit all the time, you get worn out. That being said, ever-bearing doesn't mean they're producing fruit every day of the year or every day it's warm. Ever-bearing strawberries don't set any flowers if it's above 80 degrees. So there's weeks or a month or two in the summertime we won't get any fruit. But anytime we get a couple of days below 80, they'll set some flowers, we'll get fruit. So you'll get some up into June, and then it may stop in July and September or August. You may get another couple of weeks. If we get a cold spell comes in for a week, and they'll set some more flowers, we may get some more in August or September, and then we'll get a fall crop into October, November. Sometimes I've had some even into December. So they'll produce some. They're usually not very big, the ones that are later in the year, but I keep some because my kids love to be out in the garden and love to pick strawberries. I love to pick strawberries. And so I keep a row out there for the kids so they can eat strawberries almost year round because I have a 70-foot row of them. So one of the plants has almost always got something on it. So that's the ever-bearing ones. So a little bit about maintenance. So planting, before I go into the time and how to do it, one of the most important things with all of the berries, all the things I'm talking about today, is weed control. With the strawberries, blackberries, raspberries, any kind of berries we're talking about, these are perennial crops. These crops, with any luck, could be there for 10, 20, 30, 40 years from now. Most of the time, maybe 5, but the biggest reason why strawberries or any berries are pulled out isn't because of disease, it's because of weeds. You want to do the best job you can getting the weeds under control before you plant, because it's really, really hard to do it after you plant. I've known people that they tilled up a spot in their yard, planted strawberries, and lo and behold, 3 weeks later, all of that sod that they tilled up came right back, and so now they had strawberries in the middle of their lawn. And they were asking me, okay, how do I kill all the grass? And organically, and they wanted to do it without any chemicals, and I was like, well, good luck. It may take you the rest of your lives to get the grass out of there. So you want to get good weed control. However, there's organic ways to do it. There's non-organic, there's tillage, there's a lot of ways you can do it, but you want to get rid of all of the weeds that you possibly can. And you want as sterile of a seed bank as you can get for that soil, because these crops are going to be in there a long time. For strawberries, they recommend up to 4 or 5 years is what most commercial places do. Homeowners, some of them can be in there a lot longer than that if you can stay on top of the weeds. That's the number one reason why commercial growers till them under, is because of weeds. Same with homeowners. My dad this year is tilling over his raspberry patch because he just got tired of fighting the grass and the other weeds that are in it. I did the same thing. I had a patch that I planted 5 years ago, and it's been nothing but a weed patch ever since, because I didn't have the time to do it right when I started. And so now I'm getting to do it again. So I've ripped all the raspberries out. I've tilled that spot. I'm killing all the weeds, and then I'll be putting the raspberries back. So with all of these berries, if you don't get the weeds killed first, you're probably going to get to redo it. And so save yourself some time and a lot of money by doing it right the first time, by getting those weeds under control. Second is do a soil test. You're going to need this for anything you should do this for anything you plant, but especially with berries. That way you know what you have. There's no use in wasting fertilizer that you don't need. If you do a soil test, it'll tell you exactly what you need and what you don't need. And so you can add just what you need into that soil. For planting strawberries, on this it says early spring. There's now 2 ways you can do it. You can plant the bare root ones in early spring, here in a couple of weeks, or you can plant there's plugs you can actually buy from a lot of producers in the fall. And I've done that, and I really like that as well. The reason why they started doing plugs in the fall is you plant the plugs in the fall, and if you haven't got your weeds under control right now, that might be the thing for you, is spend this summer getting the weeds under control. Then this fall, buy some plugs. They're a little bit more expensive, but you buy the plugs, you put them in the fall, you cover them with straw, and the next spring you get strawberries. You plant from bare root right now, they're cheaper, but you're still not getting any strawberries till next year. So if you haven't got your weeds under control, maybe think about doing plugs this fall and get the weeds under control over the course of the summer. For the ones you plant bare root, there's a little graphic on how deep they should be. You're going to want to remove the flowers for the first year. I know that kills you. It kills me every time I have to do it, but that allows the plant to get developed and to become a better, healthier plant. So you're sacrificing a few fruits now, other than sacrificing a few plants maybe next spring if they don't have enough energy to make it through the wintertime. Okay, mulching. With strawberries, you don't have to mulch your strawberries. There's years we don't. The reason why you want to mulch your strawberries is with our freeze-thaw cycle here in Kentucky, it freezes, it thaws, and basically it's pushing that plant up, pulling it down, pushing it up, pulling it down, and so you're breaking all those fine hairs, those feeder roots on the strawberry roots, and so you'll get a lot bigger berries if you mulch them. If you've only ever gotten small berries, maybe that's one of your problems. It could be fertility as well. But if you mulch them, you can do straw, a frost blanket, you want to cover them up with 3 to 4 inches of straw or do a really heavy frost blanket. I don't recommend hay, grass hay, unless it's not got any weeds. Reason why is I've tried it in the past, and a lot of our grass hay is cut pretty late here in Kentucky, and it's got a lot of seeds in it, and you get a lot of grass seed growing where you don't want grass, where you just got rid of all the weeds. So straw is better. There is some straw out there, and a lot of straw in Kentucky has a lot of seed on it, but it's all wheat. So worst case scenario, after June or July, that wheat's going to go to seed and then it'll be dead. So at least it'll be gone and we'll be back. Where grass, you may have a problem forever. Okay, so this is talking about an older planting. After you've had your plants in the ground for a couple of years and they're producing, after they get done setting fruit, you're going to want to renovate that bed because you got rid of all the weeds, or hopefully you have all the weeds are under control, but then the strawberries start competing with themselves. And if you grow in the ground like this one is, like in long rows, the plants on the outside that are next to that tilled area will produce the biggest berries. The plants on the inside of that row are going to produce small or no berries because they get outcompeted by the ones on the edge that have more nutrients. So you can mow or cut the foliage off. That foliage has got diseases a lot of times, different things, so you can cut that off, fertilize it a little bit with nitrogen and put some compost on there. You can thin some of the plants, or like this one, they're just tilling in between the rows to shorten or make the rows a little bit more narrow than they used to be. If you give strawberries some time, they'll just form a giant mat. And so it's nice to till between the rows, so you kind of give those plants a little bit more room to breathe and more nutrients. And then you're going to want to irrigate. After you get all that done, put some sprinklers on them. If you keep them irrigated or water them when we don't get rain in the summertime, that'll help them rebound really quick and produce a nice big crop for you the next year. Okay, so this little one, it's not so much of a problem in our strawberries. It can be, but it hasn't been much in my experience. But for the rest of the crops we're going to talk about, this one is the big new problem. And especially for those fall crops. It is the spotted wing Drosophila. And the reason why this little fruit fly, it's a fruit fly and it's really little, is a problem is because most fruit flies, if you see them in your house, they're only eating stuff that's like an old peach. If you leave an old peach out there and kind of get a little bit rotten, or leave some cut watermelon, they'll lay their eggs in that stuff. This fruit fly has a ovipositor that is really sharp, so it actually cuts into the strawberry, into the blackberry, the blueberry, the grapes, and lays its egg inside the fruit before you pick it. And it's doing that right when the plant is just getting almost ripe. So you would see it if it was like a month before the fruit, but no, it's laying its eggs in there about the same time you're picking it and eating it. So it can be kind of gross. It's not not harmful for you to eat. They've done tests, and it's just, I guess, extra protein, but it is. Oh, let's see if there you go. All right. Anyway, it is but it's a pest that we have to think about in a lot of our planning for the rest of the berries we're going to talk about. So it's something to think about. And I'm just going to include that in here. Anyway, apparently I didn't make that slide. There is a fruit guide that your extension agents have. Adam and those are going to put it up here a little bit later. We'll talk about it. But it will give you guidance on what to spray, organic methods to spray, and how to keep it out. I know here at the Arboretum, at my place, at South Farm, we've had pretty good luck using actually insect netting. We put insect netting over the crops. It keeps it out. I do on my farm. Most of my spotted wing Drosophila control is I pick varieties that are going to be less of a problem for it. And I'll explain what that means in a minute. Okay, so blackberries, a big crop for us in Kentucky. It grows really well. So that's a great thing. So whenever you talk about blackberries or a lot of berries, there's two different types. There's a primocane and a floricane. And They really need to get a different name for that because nobody knows what they're talking about. But primocane means that they bloom on their first year's growth. Primo meaning first, and cane meaning the stems that they grow on. So it blooms and fruits on the first year's growth. That is like Primark Traveler, Black Gem, and then there's Floricane. And with the floricanes, those are blooming on second year growth. That means that it's going to be growing on fruit that the canes grew this year, and the next year you're going to get the fruit on it. So there's a couple of maintenance differences in those. With the primocane, you're going to cut those. You cut all of the canes back in the fall or winter time. So you cut all the canes back. All the plants are like 6 inches tall, and they will produce blackberries later in the season. So it'll be more of a fall-bearing blackberry. Most of our blackberries are around July, maybe a little bit into August. With the primocanes, we can get them even August, September, later in the year. With the floricanes, we just cut out the old ones that are done blooming and leave the new shoots. We'll talk about pruning here in just a minute, but it's pretty easy to tell those apart. Usually the new canes are nice red or green color, and the old ones are brown, gray, and if you push on them, they break off real easy. So you'll just prune out all the old ones. So with the floricane, there's a couple of other distinctions. You can get erect, semi-erect, or trailing. There's also thornless and thorny ones. I'm not going to talk much about thorny ones. Kiowa is a thorny one. It's a really nice blackberry, produces a giant blackberry that's really sweet. I spent too many times getting thorns all over me and chiggers in the wild to plant. I don't plant any thorny ones on my farm or here, but there's plenty of thornless ones that you can plant that are easy maintenance, that do well. Cato is a new one. I'm trying it this year. It's an erect one. One of the reasons I like Cato, I used to plant a lot of Arapaho. It's an older variety. It doesn't produce super well, but the reason I plant that one, and Cato is supposed to be about the same, is they produce their berries really early. So their berries are end of June, early July. And the reason why I put that is kind of the area that I want to produce the berries. Some of it is market. There's not a lot of other growers that grow those types, and so I can get to the market before them. But one of the more biggest reasons is if I can get them off before July 4th or a little bit after July 4th, I don't have to deal with too big pests. I've not had a problem with my Arapaho, and I'm hoping with Cato is the same. With the spotted wing Drisophila, I have had that with Triple Crown. The other one is the green June bugs, or the Japanese beetles. They seem to all emerge around July 4th. And blackberries taste delicious, apparently, to green June bugs and June beetles. And so as soon as they start turning black, you'll see June bugs all over them, just going to town. So if I can get my fruits off before the June bugs emerge around the 4th of July or a little bit after the 4th of July, I won't have to spray them, or I don't have to net them. And so I try to plant varieties that bloom a little bit earlier. Now, Triple Crown does produce later. It is a really nice blackberry. I like it. It's got a really large berry. It's really sweet. But if you grow Triple Crown, you're going to have to do some sort of insect control. Because the green June bugs, I think they can smell the sweetness of the berries, and they really, really attack it. And same with the spotted wing Drosophila. In plantings of Triple Crown, you'll notice it quite a lot. And so it's one to watch as well. So planting, same kind of goes with this. You want to get those weeds under control. Blackberries are pretty tough. They can compete some with grasses and other things. They're not as needy as strawberries or raspberries, but you want to get those weeds under control so you're not fighting them forever. You want to do a soil test, and then you got to think about trellises and irrigation. They can grow without irrigation, but they're better with irrigation. They'll produce bigger berries, more berries, but you're going to need some sort of trellis. If you do the erect ones, you may not have to have a trellis. A lot of times you don't need one, but any of the semi-trailing, you're going to have a trellis. So trellising, like if you do the erect, like Cato, you could probably get by with the one that's just like 2 wires, one on each side. It just kind of supports them a little bit. Really simple trellis. But if you do like a triple crown or a Kiowa or any of those type, you're going to want to go with the 2-layered one. There are a lot of different types of trellising. There is, if you've been out to Boyd's Orchard, they have this crazy Y system that they train it to one side, and then the next year they flop it over, and that way that when you're picking the berries, all the berries are on the bottom, and so then you're picking berries in the shade. So it's really great for you pick. It's a great system, a pretty labor-intensive system, but it works really, really well for you pick. There's a lot of other trellising techniques and methods. Take a look into them, but those 2 on the screen are kind of the 2 of the most basics. With the trellising, you can have the best trellising, but if you don't do any pruning, it isn't going to matter a whole lot. So we'll talk about pruning just a bit. With blackberries, there's basically 3 different types of pruning. In the summertime, you're going to want to do a summer pinch. What does that mean? Sometime in June or July, once the plants get as tall as you want, 4 feet, 5 feet, 6 feet tall, you're going to want to pinch off the top leaf or 2 and encourage them to send branches out. That will produce more branches, and those branches produce more berries. It also makes the plants not get quite as tall, or get so tall that they fall over and then end up on the ground and you have to mow them or cut them off anyway. So it keeps them more manageable, it keeps them more erect. So you want to do a summer pinch, and then the rest of the work is going to be done pretty well in the spring or late winter, early spring. And that's removing the dead canes. You go through and remove all of those spent canes, and then you're going to prune all of those little branches that came off to about 6 to 12 inches long. I could talk about pruning for like an hour. I don't have that much time, but you can get on YouTube. This is just go to Blackberry Pruning Demonstration, University of Kentucky. Here's one with Dr. Strang. He was a professor here at UK in fruit and vegetable crops. And this is a YouTube video of him pruning both types, the erect and the trailing and semi-erect blackberries. And so he goes over all those things you need to see and do. So it's a really nice video. I liked it a lot. I don't have the time to, I was almost shot a video just like it for you guys, but I looked at the time and I was like, yeah, I'll never have time for that. But so anyway, you can go to that video, watch that if you need more help. Definitely, once you do a little bit of pruning on blackberries, or like watch this video, you become a lot more capable and understand what you really need to do. It's not really complicated, but there are a couple of things you need to do, and he goes over that really well in this video. And there is a webinar they did just a couple weeks ago that is also on YouTube called Bramble Pruning. He talks about it, Sean Wright talks about it, but doesn't really show it like John Strang's video. But it's another one if you really, if you've got some older plants and want to know how to prune them, he goes more into depth into it as well. All right, raspberries. Just like blackberries, there are 2 kinds of raspberries. There's a primocane and a florocane. Primocane means blooms in the first year's wood. Caroline is one of those. Anne is a yellow one. The thing with primocanes, like I said, with the blackberries, they're going to produce later in the season or in the fall because you cut all the canes down to about 4 to 6 inches tall, and they will send up new shoots that spring. And then once those shoots get mature, they will start flowering and set fruits. With the floricanes, like Prelude, it is a nice one. They set on that year's, on the next, the first year's growth just produces foliage. So there's no flowers on it, no nothing. And then after the winter, then it goes through the winter, then next spring, early in the spring, those canes will start flowering and setting fruit. And then after they set flower, or they fruit and flower, they will die and need to be pruned out. So trellising is pretty simple. You can, a lot of times you can get by with no trellis, but if you need a trellis, you can go with like the simple one there, just the 2 wires. And with pruning, With raspberries, you're pretty well just pruning out the dead and maybe any spindly stalks that don't look that good to kind of thin it out a little bit. But mostly I just prune out the dead. So you go through, prune out all the dead. Unless you're doing a primocane, then you would just mow that whole thing down and take everything off. This is where it gets more complicated, is the black raspberries and the purple raspberries. If you've ever grown these, they tend to throw branches everywhere and kind of fall all over everything and just make a big mess. So you're going to prune them kind of like you did those blackberries. You're going to want to pinch them in the middle of summertime and then prune all of those little stems that form off those canes. You're going to want to prune them like 6 to 12 inches long. And that's what you're going to do with black and purple raspberries. Jewel is a really nice black raspberry. I like it a lot. Royalty is a purple raspberry. They recommend it here for Kentucky. I haven't had very good, I've had good success growing the plants. I haven't been very impressed with the fruit quality. The plants grow great. I have a patch that's outcompeted all the other berries that are put with it, but the fruits never ripen all at the same time. So part of the fruit will be white, part of it will be green, part of it will be purple. And so you never really get a great looking fruit off of the plant. You might get difference in, maybe I just got a bad group of them, but I've not been crazy about their fruit quality, but the plants do grow really well for us. Anne is a yellow one. It grows just like the other raspberries. It is a primocane type. And so you will cut all of that down in the fall and winter, and it will send up new shoots, and it will bloom in the fall and set fruit in the fall. Or you can treat it like a florocane. You can, and it will set some yellow fruit in the spring, and then it'll set some in the fall off the old canes or off the new canes. So you can get potentially a double harvest. Usually though, it weakens the plant when you're harvesting twice a year. Like the strawberries, when it's producing a lot of fruit a long time, those plants will need a lot more care and attention to survive and to do well. Okay, blueberries. We're 43 minutes into this and we're up to the blueberries. So with blueberries, the biggest thing is, well, before we start this, get weeds under control. Blueberries don't compete very well with weeds. And then next is pH. Get your soil test, find what your pH is. If your pH is really high, like an 8, you might put them somewhere else or put them in a container because you may be fighting them forever. We had a blueberry patch that years ago somebody had they had dumped a load of limestone gravel in that spot, and apparently it must have got mixed in with the soil, and we wanted to plant our blueberries there. And so we planted our we did a soil test. We tested the pH. It was high. It was like an 8. So we added, and this was for like 6 blueberries, we added a 50-pound bag of sulfur, tilled it in, put in some peat moss, tilled that in, waited 2 months, tested it again. It had dropped like 0.1. Put in some more peat moss, tilled it in, waited another couple months. It had dropped maybe another 0.1 or 0.2. So after a year of adding sulfur and peat moss, it had literally dropped that almost nothing. Because there was still so much limestone in that soil that it was just buffering all of the sulfur that we were putting in it. So what we ended up doing is digging out all that soil, putting it somewhere else, and we actually brought in some soil with a lower pH and did a raised bed and put all of that soil in a raised bed and then planted the blueberries, and they've done really well since. So get a soil test, find your pH, and then with berries, you're going to want to keep them moist. They don't have very extensive root systems, so you're going to want to put irrigation in. You're going to want a lot of organic matter. You don't want to mulch them with rock or something like that. You want to put a lot of compost, wood chips, leaves, a lot of those things underneath them because they like organic matter. All right, so pH, they like a 4.5 to 5.2. With any of those, well, with any fruit crop, if possible, you're going to want to find a spot with a slope. Most of you are probably growing in your backyard. You probably don't have that option. If you grow on a large, like I have on my farm, I chose where I put my berries because of it has a slope on it and because of its exposure to the sun. But in a backyard, you may not have that. But the reason why you want a slope is cold air actually goes down. I have a spot on my farm that it's a giant sinkhole, uh, but it's just basically a depression. But if you go in there quite a few times in the year, it's a good 10 degrees colder at the bottom of that depression in that sinkhole than it is just on top of the ridge 50 feet away. And the reason why is that cold air sinks, and the reason why you want it on a slope is in the spring, I'm not really worried about that in the summertime, but in the spring when we're having frost, having my berries in that sinkhole or that depression, they have a lot better chance of getting frosted. Those flowers are frozen off. So if they're on a slope, that cold air can go away from them and they will stay a little bit warmer, and hopefully the flowers won't get frosted or frozen off. So if you get the option, if you're in a backyard, you're kind of stuck with whatever you have in a small backyard. But for a larger area, it's something to think about. With the blueberries, 2 cultivars are better for pollination. In our area, just if you've ever looked at a blueberry bush in bloom, you will see it being worked on a lot by by bumblebees. And if you look, bumblebees are kind of like robber bees. They actually chew a hole in the side of the flower to steal the pollen and stuff that's in there, because bumblebees are too big to get into the flower, and so they actually chew a hole into the flower. We apparently don't have a lot of the pollinators for blueberries. Or at least I haven't seen any. They seem to be mostly pollinated by bumblebees, and bumblebees have to do it by like chewing a hole in each little flower. And if you look at the flowers, almost every flower has a hole chewed on the side of it, so they can get in there and steal that nectar and pollen that they want. But they're still pollinating them. They still grow into nice blueberries. But if you look at any of the flowers, you'll see little holes on the side of them. That's what is happening. Is those bees are just in there. They can't squeeze themselves into that little hole to get inside, and so they're just chewing it from the outside. So this is what, when I get a soil test back, this is what it looks like. You're lucky with the extension offices, they give you a really nicer one. I've had, when I get these, it's like, oh, great, I got all these numbers, now I got to figure it out. Faye or Adam or Jessica or any of those, they will figure that out for you and send you what you need. But this just shows you, this is 4 soil tests from the Arboretum. One of them, the pH is around a 6 to a 7. One of them's down to a 4.5. And nutrient variety, like one has a potassium level of 204 pounds per acre. The other one's a phosphorus of 204. The other one's a 77. And then it's swapped. The one with only 77, the one with low phosphorus has a really high potassium. I put this on here just so you can kind of see that it doesn't, what you think you know about the soil may be drastically different than what really appears on your soil test. I have some of my farm where I have my vegetable garden and my berries is all within about 100 feet of each other. And I've taken soil test of where I grow my vegetables and everything is extremely high and I haven't added anything. And literally 5 feet away where I have my berries is really low on a lot of things. Reason why is because of how it was maintained over the last couple hundred years. Where I grow my garden used to be tobacco land, and so with tobacco, they would fertilize it pretty heavily. Where I grow my berries has been pasture, so it probably never got fertilized, or maybe a little bit of calcium once in a while, but other than that, almost nothing. Another 100 feet over, I have a pasture, and my pasture has a better pH actually than where I have my blueberries right now. And my pasture, the reason why is apparently they added a lot of nitrogen way back in the day when they were growing tobacco. And so they dropped the pH from probably a 6.5 to a 7 where it was to now my pasture is like a 4.5, where I really need to start adding lime to kind of build up the pH in my pasture. But that's all within like 200 feet. I have a pH of 4.5 to a pH of 6.5 to 7 to a pH of 5, all, and with one on one side and right in the middle is the highest pH and low on both sides of it. So it really helps to get a soil test and to be pretty specific about where you're doing your soil test so you know what's going on. You can guess at it, but a lot of times if you guess, you're going to get it wrong. Okay, blueberry pruning. With blueberries, it's pretty simple. You're kind of opening up, but just in case you want a lot more information, John Strang, good old John Strang, has another video just on blueberry pruning. Watch the video, it's great. Love John Strang, and you'll learn all you need to know about blueberry pruning. Most of mine, I don't do super lot of pruning on mine. I have some older bushes that are probably 15, 20 years old. And then I've got some that planted last year, and I'll be planting some new ones this year. On the older ones, I just kind of thin them out a little bit if they need it, and just kind of leave them alone. But John Strain, watch the video. He'll kind of show you the details and exactly where to cut and all of that stuff. Okay, so with the last one, I almost didn't share this with you all because I'm going to have to be there to get a few plants that I still need. If you've tried to order berry plants right now, you're probably out of luck. My dad's redoing his raspberry bed, like I just mentioned, and he went to order some new raspberries, and everything is sold out. All he can find is 5 of this and 5 of that. So he's having to make do without raspberries this year. So you have the opportunity. Faye is holding a berry and asparagus plant sale at the end of March. And some pretty good prices on it, and some pretty good berries. Like I said, she got the Flavor Fest strawberries, the Cato and Triple Crown blackberries, the Prelude raspberries, the Millennium asparagus, which is a new one. I'm kind of interested to see how it does. But an opportunity to get some berries. I almost didn't mention this because I need a bunch of those, and so but Faye promised to save me some. So if you guys didn't buy everything, with that, is there any questions?
Awesome. Thanks for the plug, Jesse. We do have a limit on the amount of plants you can get. So, sorry, I've got some voices in the background here. But yes, that sale will be on March 27th. We have a limit of 10 plants per variety. So we'll see how that goes. This is our first time doing a berry plant sale, so we're excited about it. So we have some questions. The first one is, what's your top recommendation for weed control and site prep?
All right, recommendation. There's a couple ways you can do it. If you want to do the conventional method, Roundup or glyphosate, you can spray that. I would do that if you're going to do glyphosate or one of those. I do it 2 or 3 times. I would spray it, wait a couple weeks, let anything regrow, and spray it again, and wait a couple more weeks and regrow and spray it again. That's if you want to do conventional. On my farm, we do a lot more. We try to do everything organic that we can. So what that entails, if you're going to do it organic, is more of like a silage tarp or black plastic. So you take a tarp, you can take it really in a backyard, you can take any tarp you have and lay it over the soil and put some cinder blocks or something on it to hold it down, and leave that there for a month or 2 until it's really killed everything underneath it. Black plastic heats up, so it kind of cooks into the weed seeds that are on the top. Now, I've used that with a lot of success. So with organic, that's what I would do, is put that tarp down. You can put in a smaller garden, if you want a really small space, put some cardboard down, some pretty heavy cardboard, and then put a bunch of wood chips and leaf clippings or leaves on there. Let that break down. That will do it on a small space. But in a little bit larger place, a tarp or black plastic, leave that on there for a couple months, and that should kill everything underneath it.
Great, thanks. The next question is, why do the thorned blackberries get chiggers and the non-thorned ones don't?
All right, there's really no correlation to which ones get chiggers. It's more of where they're planted. I've noticed on my farm that if I can keep the grass short, I don't get chiggers, but if I let it grow, like, let's say 6 inches to a foot or 2 foot tall, that I get chiggers. So most of the time, the thorny blackberries that I have are wild ones, and so they're growing along the fence lines and they're growing in the pasture. So they're growing in areas that aren't maintained. So if you had Kiowa and you kept your rows mowed, you wouldn't have any chiggers. It doesn't come with chiggers. It's more of just where they're at.
Okay, the next question is, how do you space plants to anticipate for their spreading?
Okay, for each of those, for strawberries, blackberries, all of those, there's a recommended spacing. With strawberries, planting, I put mine about a foot apart on kind of a triangle. So there's one, and then another, you space a foot, and then offset it by 6 inches, and there's one. I usually do a double row on my strawberries, so they're about a foot apart in the row, and then the next row is offset, kind of like little triangles. And most of your fruit catalogs will show you the spacing. You can always cram them a little bit closer together. You can always spread them a little bit farther apart. The same goes with fruit trees. There's orchards out there. I have about 100 trees to an acre in my orchard, but there's orchards now that some of the high density orchards that do 1,000 trees per acre or even more than that. So it's all on how big the plant gets. There are some plants that are going to get bigger. So if I was planting Kiowa, I would definitely give it a lot more space than if I was planting Cato. Cato is more of a clumper, and so it'll spread out gradually to fill out. But for most of the blackberries, I put on my farm, I put about 1.5 to 2 foot between plants, and then I have a pretty wide space between that row. For mine, it's 8 feet, but it's a lot more than you need. But I have it big enough I can drive my car down in, or my truck, so if I need to load stuff. But in the row, I'd say for most of your berries, probably 2 feet, more for blueberries, but you can cram them together if you need to, squish them together. They will adjust to however tight you plant them. There'll be some that get pushed out, but I would say about 2 feet is a pretty safe for blackberries and blueberries. For raspberries, I'd maybe go a foot between each raspberry plant.
Excellent, thanks. Sue says, I've been pruning my primocane blackberries to the ground, also her Caroline raspberries. You said 6 inches?
They can be mowed to the ground. And that's totally fine. On a lot of my stuff, I usually leave it to about 6 inches just because I worry about hitting the crown when I mow or something, so I leave them a little bit taller. But it can be 4 inches. You can mow them to the ground. It can be anywhere in there. If you leave them 6 inches, you'll probably have to go back through and break off those because they will die, or they could set off new shoots. So to the ground is fine.
Okay. Should I have more than one variety of blackberry is the next question.
That is a question I don't know for sure. I have more than one because I have different, I try to lengthen the season out, and that may be something to think about. For pollination wise, I don't know if you have to have more than one. I don't think you probably do, but for length of a season, most of your like Cato and Triple Crown, they're going to be producing for about 2 to 3 weeks each. So if you plant Cato, you'll get 2 or 3 weeks, and then Triple Crown will come in after that. And so you can extend your blackberry season from the end of June clear up into August, where if you just had one, it'd only be like 3 weeks and then you'd be done.
Yep, that's exactly right. And even for like the blueberries and stuff, they'll say plant more than one variety, but normally that's just for like larger plantings. They'll still produce fine for a backyard gardener with just one variety. But like you said, Jesse, people plant more than one so they extend that season. The next question was, do you know if Cato is resistant to orange rust?
I don't know off the top of my head. I would have to look it up.
I'll have to do the same too. I think it is.
I know it. It's one of the new Arkansas varieties, and it's. I'm guessing most of their stuff is, so I would say it is, but I would have to look it up.
And then one more question I'm seeing, and of course, feel free to type more in, but how to prepare soil for raspberries.
Okay, how to prepare the soil. First, make sure that all your weeds are eliminated. And then after that, I would you don't want to over prepare your soil for anything. So you could till it a couple times. We've got one of my workers has a neighbor that tilled their garden like 20 times over the course of a summer. And then he sifted it and he put it all back. And after he got done with that, it rained and it turned it into basically concrete because he totally destroyed the soil structure. So you don't want to till it that much. Most of my stuff, I till it maybe 2 or 3 passes. And if the weeds are all dead before then, you may have, if you don't get rid of all your weeds and you're just relying on tillage, you may have to till it more than that. But if you've covered it or sprayed it or whatever you've done, you should only have to till it 2 or 3 times and then dig the planting hole and plant it in. I don't usually recommend putting anything in the planting hole but the soil that came out of it. I do use a compost on the top as a mulch. Anyone that on my farm, I use thoroughbred compost. I also Winnie the Pooh compost. Any of those that are straw or wood based with horse manure that's been composted, I like a lot. The berries seem to really thrive with that. But if you can't afford that, you can use wood chips or composted leaves or any of those things to help keep the weeds out of there as well.
Great, thanks. Oh, Jessica said Cato has not shown any orange rust. Sorry, it just went away. Orange rust in variety trials. So that's a good thing. Good. Cato proven to be disease-free. Great. Yeah, it's supposed to be a really good one. Before our fruit specialist, John Strang, retired, I was planning for my plant sale last year, which we ended up canceling due to COVID, but we're having it this year. That was one of his top recommendations, was the Cato, because of disease resistance and just producing well. Any other questions? Feel free to unmute if you'd like to do it that way, or type it in the chat. Otherwise, we're going to start wrapping it up and take maybe 1 or 2 more questions. And let Jesse get back to work at the Arboretum. You have some fun planned for the afternoon, Jesse?
Oh, it's just more meetings for today.
Well, on a kind of a rainy day like this, it's a good day for that.
Yeah, it should be looking nice. If you guys get a chance to come out, I would say right now is probably not our best time. In about 2 weeks, our daffodils are about 2 weeks behind schedule. We have probably 100,000 daffodils that bloom when they bloom, but they're just coming up. Most of them are about 4 to 6 inches tall now. So in about 2 or 3 weeks, they should really start showing.
Hey, Jesse, I noticed daffodils do seem to be late. Why is that? The cold snap?
Yeah, it was it was the snow, the ice that was on the ground. And then even after that, we were getting, every night was like in the 24. So it was really cold. And so they didn't have much incentive to get up and get going yet. But with this week, they're shooting up like 1 inch or 2 every day this week. So I'd say by next week, probably February gold and some of the other tete-a-tete should be blooming.
Great. We got some thank yous coming in. Well, thank you all so much for joining today. Thank you, Jesse, so much for all your knowledge and taking time out of your day to present for us on this. Thank you all.